The smell of smoke hit Catherine Elliott's senses before she saw the first orange glow on the horizon. And in that moment, she knew her world was about to change forever. It was August 1882 in Victor, Colorado, a small town nestled in the mountains where her father's ranch sprawled across 300 acres of prime cattle land. The summer had been unusually dry, turning the prairie grass into kindling and the pine forests into torches waiting for a spark. Catherine had been riding her horse, checking on the southern fence line when the wind shifted and brought that acrid warning to her nostrils. She was 22 years old, born and raised on this land, and she knew the danger immediately. Her father, Samuel Wayne, had taught her everything about ranching since she was old enough to sit a saddle. He'd lost his wife, Catherine's mother, to fever when Catherine was just 7, and he'd raised her alone with the help of their ranch hands. She could rope a steer, brand cattle, and shoot straight enough to keep wolves at bay. But fire was different. Fire was the one thing that terrified even the toughest ranchers in these parts. She wheeled her mare around and kicked her into a gallop, racing back toward the main ranch house. The wind was picking up, hot and dry against her face, blowing from the southwest. That meant the fire, wherever it had started, would be heading straight for their property. Her long auburn hair streamed behind her as she rode, her green eyes scanning the horizon with growing alarm. By the time she reached the ranch yard, several of the hands had already spotted the smoke. Her father stood on the porch, his weathered face grim as he stared at the darkening sky to the south. "Papa," Catherine called out, dismounting quickly. "It's bad. The wind is pushing it this way fast." Samuel nodded, his jaw set. "I can see that, girl. We need to get the livestock moved to the north pastures and start wetting down the buildings. Where are the men?" "Most are out on the range," Catherine said, her voice tight with worry. "We sent them out this morning to round up strays near Bear Creek." Her father cursed under his breath. That was 10 miles away, too far for them to get back in time to help. They had maybe 3 hands nearby, not nearly enough to save everything. As if reading her thoughts, Samuel said, "We'll do what we can. Get the horses into the north corral and open the gates for the cattle. They'll run on their own once they smell the smoke strong enough." Catherine was about to head for the barn when she heard the thunder of approaching hooves. She turned to see a rider coming up the road at full speed, his horse lathered with sweat. As he drew closer, she recognized him as Cole Emerson, a cowboy who'd been working at the neighboring ranch for the past 6 months. Cole was 25, tall and lean with sun-bronzed skin and dark brown hair that brushed his collar. He had gray-blue eyes that seemed to see everything at once, and a quiet competence that Catherine had noticed the few times their paths had crossed in town. He'd always been polite but distant, keeping to himself mostly, though she'd heard he was one of the best horsemen in the territory. "Mr. Wayne," Cole called out as he reined in his mount. "The fire jumped Little Creek about an hour ago. It's moving fast, eating up everything in its path. The Hendersons' place is already gone and they barely got out with their lives." Catherine felt her stomach drop. The Henderson ranch was only 8 miles south. That meant they had less time than she'd thought. "We're getting the livestock moved now," Samuel said. "Our men are too far out to help." Cole looked at the billowing smoke, then back at Samuel and Catherine. "I can help. My boss sent me to warn folks and lend a hand where needed." "What do you need me to do?" Relief flooded Catherine's chest. Another experienced hand could make all the difference. Her father quickly outlined the plan. Move the horses and cattle to the north pastures where the creek would provide some protection, wet down the buildings as much as possible, and save what they could from the house. The next hour passed in a blur of frantic activity. Catherine worked alongside Cole, driving the horses from the main corral to the northern pasture. She noticed how he moved with quiet efficiency, never wasting motion, always thinking 2 steps ahead. When one of the young colts panicked and tried to bolt back toward the barn, Cole was there, cutting him off and guiding him back with the others. "You're good with them," Catherine shouted over the growing wind. "Grew up with horses," Cole called back. "They're more sensible than most people once you learn their language." They got the last of the horses secured and turned their attention to the cattle. The smoke was much thicker now, rolling across the southern fields in dark waves. Catherine could see flames in the distance, a terrifying wall of orange and red advancing across the dry grassland. The cattle were already spooked, milling nervously in their pens. When Catherine and Cole opened the gates, they stampeded north in a river of hide and horn, instinct driving them away from the approaching danger. Catherine's mare danced nervously beneath her, eyes rolling white at the smell of smoke. "Easy, girl," Catherine murmured, stroking her neck. "We're getting out of here soon." Cole rode up beside her. "Your father wants you to start loading valuables from the house. I'll help the hands wet down the roofs." "I can help with the roofs," Catherine protested. "I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting." Cole's gray-blue eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of what might have been amusement. "I don't doubt that for a second, Miss Wayne, but there are only so many of us, and we need to work smart. Your father knows what can't be replaced, and so do you. We need those things out of the house before the fire gets here." He was right, of course, but Catherine hated feeling like she was abandoning the fight. Still, she nodded and turned her horse toward the main house. Behind her, she heard Cole and the other hands hauling water from the well, climbing onto roofs with buckets and soaked blankets. Inside the house, her father was already pulling things from drawers and shelves. The family Bible, her mother's jewelry, the deed to the ranch, what little cash they kept in the house. Catherine grabbed her mother's wedding dress from the cedar chest in her bedroom, along with the few photographs they owned. Everything else, all the furniture and household goods they'd accumulated over the years, would have to take its chances. The smoke was so thick now it was getting hard to breathe. Catherine tied a bandana over her nose and mouth as she worked, her eyes stinging and watering. Through the windows, she could see the flames clearly now, racing across the southern pasture with terrifying speed. The wind had picked up even more, turning the wildfire into a monster that consumed everything in its path. "Catherine, that's enough," her father shouted. "We need to go now." She grabbed one last bundle and ran for the door. Outside, the world had turned dark and orange, smoke blocking out the afternoon sun. Cole and the hands had abandoned the roofs, the futility of their efforts clear. You couldn't fight something like this with buckets of water. All you could do was run. "Everyone to the north pasture," Samuel ordered. "Stay together and keep moving." They mounted up and rode hard, the smoke burning in their lungs, ash falling around them like black snow. Catherine's mare was terrified now, nearly uncontrollable, but Catherine held her steady through sheer force of will. Beside her, Cole rode with his bandana pulled up over his face, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. They'd almost made it to the creek when Catherine heard a sound that made her blood run cold, a scream, high and terrified, coming from somewhere to the east. She reined in her horse, looking around frantically. "Did you hear that?" she shouted to Cole. He'd heard it too. His head snapped toward the sound and his eyes widened. "There's someone out there." Samuel had heard it as well. "Could be someone from one of the other ranches got cut off by the fire." "I'll go," Cole said immediately, already turning his horse. "You'll die," Samuel said bluntly. "The fire's too close." "I can make it," Cole insisted. The wind's shifting slightly to the east. It's opening a gap. Catherine didn't hesitate. I'm coming with you. No, both men said at once. Catherine fixed her father with a determined stare. Two sets of eyes are better than one. And two horses can carry more if there's more than one person. Before either man could argue further, she kicked her mare forward, following Cole as he raced toward the screams. Behind her, she heard her father cursing, but she knew he wouldn't follow. He had to get the hands to safety, had to preserve what was left of everything they'd worked for. Cole and Catherine rode hard through the smoke, following the desperate cries. The heat was intense now, the fire close enough that Catherine could feel it on her skin like standing too close to an oven. Her mare wanted to bolt in the opposite direction, and it took all of Catherine's strength to keep her moving forward. Then she saw them. A woman and two small children, huddled in a shallow draw where a creek had once run but was now just a dry bed. The woman was beating at embers that had caught on her skirt, the children clinging to her and sobbing. Cole reached them first, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Madam, we need to move now." The woman looked up, her face streaked with soot and tears. "I can't carry them both. We were visiting the Petersons when the fire came. Everyone scattered. I got lost with my babies." "You don't need to carry them," Cole said, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. He scooped up the smaller child, a boy who couldn't have been more than 3, and lifted him onto his horse. The horse danced nervously, but Cole's steady hand kept it in place. Catherine dismounted and reached for the other child, a girl about 5 years old. "Come here, sweetheart. We're going to get you somewhere safe." The girl came to her, and Catherine lifted her onto her mare. The woman was struggling to stand, her skirt badly burned, her legs unsteady. "Can you ride?" Cole asked. The woman nodded, though her face was tight with pain. Cole helped her up behind the little girl, then mounted behind the boy. Catherine pulled herself up last, her mare snorting and tossing her head. "Hold on tight," Catherine told the woman. "Don't let go no matter what." They turned the horses north and rode as if all the demons of hell were chasing them, and in a way they were. The fire had reached the draw where they'd found the family, flames shooting up the dry grass in walls of heat and light. Catherine's lungs felt like they were full of glass, every breath painful. Her eyes streamed tears, partially from the smoke and partially from fear. Cole was slightly ahead, his horse carrying the double weight with powerful strides. Catherine kept her mare close behind, trusting Cole to find the safest path. Around them, the world was an inferno, but Cole seemed to have an instinct for finding the gaps, the places where the fire hadn't quite reached yet. They burst out of the smoke suddenly, crossing into an area where the wind had pushed the flames in a different direction. The air was still thick and hot, but breathable. Catherine gasped, pulling down her bandana and coughing hard. "Keep going," Cole shouted back. "We're not clear yet." They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes, finally reaching the creek where Samuel and the ranch hands had gathered. Her father saw them coming and rode out to meet them, relief evident on his weathered face. "Thank God," Samuel breathed. "I thought you were both done for." The woman with the children was crying, thanking them over and over. One of the ranch hands recognized her as Margaret Price, wife of a shopkeeper in town. He helped her and the children down from the horses, wrapping them in blankets despite the heat. Catherine slid from her mare, her legs shaky. The adrenaline that had kept her going drained away all at once, leaving her trembling. She stroked her mare's neck, murmuring thanks to the brave animal who'd carried her through hell itself. Cole dismounted more slowly, checking his horse over carefully. The animal was exhausted, sides heaving, but seemed otherwise unharmed. He patted the horse's shoulder, then turned to look back at the fire. From this distance, they could see the full scope of the disaster. The entire southern horizon was ablaze, flames reaching hundreds of feet into the sky, smoke billowing in massive black clouds. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes as she realized their ranch house, the barn, everything they'd built was probably gone. Her father came to stand beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Buildings can be rebuilt," he said quietly. "People can't. You did a brave thing today, girl. A foolish thing, maybe, but brave." "Cole did the brave thing," Catherine said, glancing at the cowboy who stood a little apart from the others, still watching the fire. "I just followed him." "You both did," Samuel corrected. "Those children would be dead if not for you two." The group stayed by the creek until nightfall, watching helplessly as the fire burned itself out. The wind finally died down as the sun set, and the flames lost their fuel as they reached areas that had burned already or hit natural fire breaks. By the time darkness fell, the worst of it was over, though embers still glowed across the blackened landscape like fallen stars. Margaret Price and her children were taken to town by one of the hands. She was still thanking Catherine and Cole when she left, her voice hoarse from smoke and crying. The children clung to their mother, silent and shocked by what they'd been through. When it was safe enough, Samuel, Catherine, Cole, and the remaining hands rode back toward what had been the ranch. Catherine's heart sank as they approached. The house was gone, reduced to a smoldering foundation and a few standing chimneys. The barn was a skeleton of charred beams. The outbuildings had vanished entirely, but some things had survived. The main corral's fencing, being made of stone and iron, still stood. One of the storage sheds at the far north edge of the property had been spared, and most importantly, they'd saved the livestock. The cattle and horses were safe in the northern pastures, and that meant they could rebuild. Samuel sat on his horse, looking at the ruins of his home with an expression Catherine couldn't quite read. Sadness, certainly, but also something like determination. "We've still got the land," he said finally. "We've still got the herd. That's more than some folks will have after today." "Where will you stay?" Cole asked quietly. Samuel looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the crisis had begun. "I suppose we'll camp out until we can put up something more permanent. We've got tents and supplies in the shed that survived. What about you?" "Did the fire reach your boss's place?" Cole shook his head. "It went south of us. Everyone over there is fine, but I figure you'll need help rebuilding. If you'll have me, I'd like to offer my services. My boss won't mind if I explain the situation." Catherine felt something warm bloom in her chest. This man, who barely knew them, was offering to help rebuild their entire lives. Samuel must have felt it too, because his voice was gruff with emotion when he said, "We'd be grateful for the help. Can't pay much right now, but we'll feed you and give you a place to sleep." "That's all I need," Cole said simply. They made camp that night in the surviving storage shed, which was crowded but serviceable. The hands brought supplies from various caches around the property, things that had been stored away from the main buildings. They had bedrolls, some food, basic tools. It wasn't comfortable, but it would do. Catherine couldn't sleep. She lay on her bedroll, staring up at the shed's roof, her mind replaying the events of the day. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those flames, felt that terrible heat. And she saw Cole calm and focused in the middle of chaos, risking his life to save people he didn't even know. She heard movement outside and sat up. Through the shed's door, she could see a figure silhouetted against the night sky, still glowing faintly orange from distant embers. She recognized Cole's lean frame. Wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the night chill, Catherine stepped outside. Cole was sitting on a rock, looking out at the burned landscape. He glanced over as she approached but didn't seem surprised to see her. "Can't sleep either?" Catherine asked, settling onto another rock nearby. "Not much," Cole admitted. "I keep thinking about those kids." A few minutes later and we wouldn't have found them in time. "But we did," Catherine said firmly. "You did. You're the one who heard them first, who decided to go back." Cole shook his head. "You came with me. That took guts. Your father wasn't wrong when he called it foolish, though. We could have both died." "But we didn't," Catherine pointed out. "And because we didn't, Margaret Price still has her children. That's worth the risk." Cole looked at her, and in the dim light, Catherine saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Respect, certainly, but also something else. Something warmer. "You're not like other ranchers' daughters I've met," he said after a moment. Catherine felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" "A compliment," Cole said, his own lips quirking up slightly. "Most women I've known would have fainted at the first sight of that fire. You rode straight into it." "My father raised me to be practical," Catherine said. "Fainting doesn't solve problems." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the night. Catherine found herself acutely aware of Cole's presence, the way he sat so still, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. She'd noticed him before, of course, at church and at the general store in town, but she'd never really talked to him. Now, after what they'd been through together, she felt a connection she couldn't quite explain. "What made you become a cowboy?" she asked, genuinely curious. Cole was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I didn't have much choice in the matter. I grew up on a small farm in Kansas. My parents died when I was 15. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I had a younger sister, but our aunt took her in. Said she couldn't handle both of us. So I left, found work where I could. Turned out I was good with horses, and that skill took me west." Catherine heard the pain beneath his matter-of-fact words. "I'm sorry, that must have been hard." "It was a long time ago," Cole said, but his voice held old grief. "What about you? You said your father raised you. What happened to your mother? Fever like yours," Catherine said softly. "I was 7. I don't remember her as well as I'd like. My father never remarried. I think he loved her too much to try replacing her." "That's a rare thing," Cole said. "Real love like that. Do you believe in it?" Catherine asked. "Real love." Cole looked at her, and something in his eyes made her heart beat faster. "I'm starting to," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Catherine didn't quite have words for. Then Cole stood, breaking the spell. "We should try to get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Catherine nodded, standing as well. As they walked back to the shed together, her hand accidentally brushed his, and she felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with the fire they'd survived. The next weeks were a blur of hard work. Cole was as good as his word, showing up every morning ready to help with whatever needed doing. Together with Samuel and the ranch hands, they began the slow process of rebuilding. The first priority was shelter. They constructed a simple bunkhouse, nothing fancy but solid enough to keep out the weather. Catherine insisted on helping with every aspect, from hauling lumber to hammering nails. Cole worked alongside her, and she noticed how he never treated her differently than he did the men. Never suggested she should be doing something else. He seemed to understand that this ranch was as much hers as it was her father's, that she had as much right to rebuild it as anyone. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day, talking quietly in the evenings after the others had gone to sleep. Catherine learned more about Cole with each passing day. She learned that he had a quiet sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, that he loved horses with an almost spiritual devotion, that he read poetry when he could get his hands on it, which surprised her. "You don't seem like the poetry type," she'd said when she caught him reading a borrowed book of Whitman one evening. Cole had given her a wry look. "What type do I seem like?" Catherine had felt herself blush. "I didn't mean it as an insult. I just meant you're so practical, so focused on the work at hand." "Poetry is practical," Cole had said seriously. "It reminds you why the work matters, what you're working toward." Catherine had thought about that long into the night. She'd never met a man quite like Cole Emerson. Most of the cowboys she knew were either crude and rough or trying too hard to be gentlemen. Cole was neither. He was simply himself, solid and real with hidden depths that fascinated her more the longer she knew him. Samuel noticed the growing connection between them. Catherine could tell. He watched them work together with a thoughtful expression, but he never said anything. Catherine wondered what he was thinking. Did he approve? Did he worry? She couldn't tell, and she wasn't sure she wanted to know. About a month after the fire, word came to them about the prices. Margaret had come through town to personally thank Catherine and Cole again, this time bringing the children who were healthy and happy, the terror of the fire already fading into memory for them. "I wanted you to see them," Margaret had said, tears in her eyes. "I wanted you to see what you saved. My husband and I will never forget what you did. Never." After Margaret left, Catherine found herself crying, the emotions she'd been holding back since the fire finally breaking through. She'd slipped away from the worksite, not wanting anyone to see, but Cole had followed her. "Hey," he'd said softly, sitting down beside her where she'd hidden behind the partially rebuilt barn. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Catherine had said, wiping at her eyes. "I don't know why I'm crying. Those children are safe. That's a good thing." "Sometimes good things make us cry too," Cole had said. "Means we're human, that we care." Catherine had looked at him, this man who'd come into her life in the middle of a disaster and somehow become essential to it. "I'm glad you were there that day," she'd said. "I'm glad you stayed." Cole had held her gaze, and Catherine had seen her own feelings reflected back at her. "I'm glad I stayed too," he'd said quietly. He'd reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek, and Catherine had felt that touch all the way to her soul. For a moment, she'd thought he might kiss her, and she'd known with absolute certainty that she wanted him to. But then they'd heard her father calling for them, and the moment had passed. But something had shifted between them after that. The awareness that had been growing became impossible to ignore. Catherine found herself watching Cole when she thought he wasn't looking, noticing the way his shoulders moved when he swung a hammer, the way the sun caught in his dark hair, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. And she caught him watching her too, his gray-blue eyes following her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The ranch slowly took shape again. The new bunkhouse was completed, then a modest house for Samuel and Catherine. It wasn't as grand as what they'd lost, but it was sturdy and well-built, and it felt like home. They rebuilt the barn next, working through the late summer heat, everyone pitching in. One evening in early September, after a particularly long day of work, Cole asked Catherine to walk with him. They'd been doing this more and more lately, stealing time alone together when they could. They walked to a rise overlooking the ranch, where they could see everything they'd rebuilt spread out below them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Catherine uncomfortably of the fire, but in a beautiful way this time. "We've done good work," Cole said, his voice satisfied. "We have," Catherine agreed. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Cole said, looking at her seriously. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Catherine Wayne. You could do anything you set your mind to." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "You give me too much credit." "I don't think I give you enough," Cole said. He was standing close to her now, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cooling evening air. "Catherine, I need to tell you something." Her heart started beating faster. "What is it?" Cole took a breath, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked nervous. "When I came here that day during the fire, I was just doing what any decent person would do, helping neighbors in trouble. I never planned to stay. But then I met you and everything changed." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. "Cole, let me finish," he said gently. "I've been drifting for 10 years, never staying anywhere long, never letting myself care too much about anything except the horses. I told myself that was enough, that I didn't need more, but I was wrong. I know I'm just a cowboy. I don't have land or money or prospects. But I'm a hard worker and I'm honest, and I would spend every day of my life making sure you knew how much I care about you. If you'll have me." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were entirely different from the ones she'd cried before. "You think I care about land or money? Cole, you rode into a wildfire to save strangers. You stayed to help rebuild everything we lost, asking nothing in return. You've worked beside me every day, treating me like an equal, making me laugh, making me think. How could I not care about you?" Cole's eyes widened slightly. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I've been half in love with you since you rode after those children without a second thought," Catherine said, her voice shaking slightly. "And I've been all the way in love with you for weeks now. I just didn't know how to tell you." The smile that broke across Cole's face was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of joy. "You love me." "I do," Catherine said, and suddenly she was laughing and crying at the same time. "I absolutely do." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Catherine felt like she'd come home to a place she hadn't even known she was looking for. When he finally pulled back enough to look at her face, his own expression was tender. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling that day during the fire, watching you ride into danger without hesitation because someone needed help. You're the bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known, and I don't deserve you, but I'll spend my life trying to." "You deserve everything good," Catherine said fiercely. "And yes, Cole Emerson, whatever you were going to ask me, yes." Cole laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "I haven't asked you yet." "Then ask me," Catherine said, smiling up at him. Cole took both her hands in his grip warm and solid. "Catherine Wayne, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband, your partner in all things? I promise I'll work hard to give you the life you deserve. I'll love you and stand by you and never give you cause to regret saying yes." "Yes," Catherine said immediately. "Yes, I'll marry you. And you already give me everything I need." Cole kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Catherine felt the last pieces of her heart that hadn't been his fall into place. They stood there as the sun finished setting, holding each other, and Catherine thought about the strange path that had brought them to this moment. A wildfire had destroyed her home, but it had also brought her Cole. She wouldn't have chosen to go through that terror, but she couldn't regret where it had led. When they finally made their way back to the ranch, hand in hand, Samuel was waiting on the porch of the new house. He took one look at their faces and his own expression softened. "I guess I don't need to ask what you two were talking about," he said. "Cole asked me to marry him," Catherine said, unable to keep the joy out of her voice. "I said yes. Papa, I hope you approve." Samuel looked at Cole for a long moment, his weathered face serious. "That depends." "Cole Emerson, do you love my daughter with everything I am?" Cole said without hesitation. "Will you be good to her? Work hard to build a good life together?" "I will, sir. I promise you that." "Will you respect her, listen to her, treat her as the capable woman she is, always?" Cole said. Samuel nodded slowly, then his face broke into a smile. "Then you have my blessing. Catherine's mother would have liked you, I think. She always said the measure of a man was what he did when things got hard. You've more than proven yourself." Catherine hugged her father, feeling his arms come around her tight. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered. "You deserve to be happy, girl," Samuel said gruffly. "And if he makes you happy, that's all I need to know." The wedding was planned for October, after the harvest was in, and they'd finished the major rebuilding work. They held it in the small church in Victor, with half the town in attendance. The story of how Cole and Catherine had saved the Price children had spread, and they'd become something of local heroes, though both of them felt uncomfortable with the attention. Margaret Price insisted on making Catherine's wedding dress, and it was beautiful, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar that had belonged to Margaret's grandmother. Catherine wore her mother's pearl earrings, the ones Samuel had saved from the fire, and she carried wildflowers that Cole had picked for her that morning. Cole wore a new suit, looking both handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothes. When Catherine walked down the aisle toward him, his face lit up in a way that made her heart soar. She thought he'd never looked more handsome than he did in that moment, his eyes shining with love and joy. The ceremony was simple, the words traditional but heartfelt. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, Samuel cleared his throat loudly, making everyone nervous until he said, "I object to the idea that anyone could ever find a better match than these two. Proceed." Laughter rippled through the church, and Catherine felt tears of happiness sting her eyes. When Cole kissed her as his wife for the first time, Catherine whispered against his lips, "I'll never leave you now." Cole smiled and whispered back, "And I'll never leave you. We're bound together, come what may." The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the new barn and food contributed by neighbors from all over the county. There was music and dancing, and Catherine danced with her new husband until her feet ached, not caring a bit. Late in the evening, as the party wound down, Catherine and Cole slipped away from the celebrations. They walked to the same rise where Cole had proposed, looking out over the ranch that had brought them together. "Happy?" Cole asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I knew I could be," Catherine said honestly. "It's strange, isn't it? How something terrible can lead to something wonderful." "The fire brought us together," Cole agreed. "But it was you who made me stay. Your courage, your strength, your heart. Those would have caught me no matter how we met." "We should probably head back," Catherine said reluctantly. "People will notice we're gone." "Let them notice," Cole said, kissing her temple. "I want a few more minutes with just my wife." Catherine loved the sound of that word, wife. She was Cole's wife now, and he was her husband, and they had a whole future stretching out before them. They built that future day by day, working side by side as they had from the beginning. Cole officially joined the ranch as a partner, his expertise with horses proving invaluable as they expanded their breeding operation. Catherine handled the business side of things, her sharp mind for numbers and negotiation making them profitable again within 2 years. They added onto the house as they could afford it, making room for the family they both wanted. Their first child, a son they named Samuel Cole, was born in the spring of 1884. Catherine had been nervous about becoming a mother, but Cole was there with her through it all, steady and supportive. When he held their son for the first time, Catherine saw tears in his eyes, and she knew he was thinking of his own parents, wishing they could have met their grandson. Samuel Sr. doted on his grandson, teaching him to ride almost before he could walk. The old rancher seemed to grow younger with the baby in the house, his laughter ringing out more often than Catherine could remember in years. Their daughter, Rose, came 2 years later in 1886, tiny and perfect with Catherine's auburn hair and Cole's gray-blue eyes. Cole was just as tender with his daughter as he'd been with his son, and Catherine loved watching him cradle the baby girl with his work-roughened hands so gentle. The ranch continued to prosper. Word of their quality horses spread throughout Colorado and beyond. Cole's skill at training and breeding created animals that were sought after by ranchers and cavalry alike. Catherine's business acumen ensured they got fair prices and made smart investments. But more than the success, Catherine treasured the life they'd built together. The quiet mornings when she'd wake up in Cole's arms, watching the sun rise through their bedroom window. The evenings when they'd sit on the porch after the children were asleep, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence between words. The way Cole always found small ways to show his love, bringing her wildflowers he'd spotted on the range, taking on extra chores when she was tired, listening to her opinions and ideas with genuine interest. They had their challenges, of course. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick livestock and money worries. But they faced everything together, and Catherine found that sharing the burdens made them lighter while sharing the joys made them sweeter. In 1888, Samuel Sr.'s health began to decline. He was 72 now, and the years of hard ranch work were catching up with him. Catherine nursed him through his final illness, with Cole supporting her every step of the way. On a clear autumn morning, Samuel passed peacefully in his sleep, a smile on his weathered face. Catherine grieved deeply for her father, but she took comfort in knowing he'd lived to see her happy, had met his grandchildren, had seen the ranch not just survive but thrive after the fire. On his headstone, next to her mother's name, they carved, "A man who measured his worth in love and legacy." After Samuel's death, Cole insisted on adding his name to the ranch alongside Catherine's. "This has always been your family's land," he said. "I'm just lucky enough to be part of that family now." But Catherine had the deed changed to read Wayne and Emerson Ranch, because it was both of their families now. Their children would carry both names forward. More children came as the years passed. Another son in 1889 whom they named Thomas, and twin girls in 1891, Emma and Elizabeth. Their house rang with laughter and life, with the sounds of children playing and learning and growing. Cole proved to be a wonderful father, patient and kind but firm when needed. He taught all their children to ride, to work hard, to treat animals with respect. But more than that, he taught them by example what it meant to love someone fully, to be a partner in all things, to face life's challenges with courage and grace. Catherine sometimes thought about that day during the fire, about how terrified she'd been, how sure she'd been that she was about to lose everything. In a way, she had lost everything: the house she'd grown up in, the barn where her father had taught her to ride, all the physical reminders of her childhood. But what she'd gained was worth so much more. She'd gained Cole, and through him, she'd found a love deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. She'd gained a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. She'd gained a family that filled her days with purpose and her heart with joy. One evening in the summer of 1895, Catherine and Cole sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel was 11 now, tall and serious like his father. Rose was 9, already showing signs of Catherine's determination. Thomas was 6, always getting into mischief. And the twins at 4 were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and sharing secret twin languages. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine asked Cole suddenly. Taking a chance on a rancher's daughter and a burned-out piece of land, Cole looked at her surprised. "Regret it, Catherine? That fire brought me the only real home I've ever had. It brought me you. How could I regret the best thing that ever happened to me?" "Even with 5 wild children running you ragged," Catherine teased. "Especially with 5 wild children," Cole said, pulling her close. "Though I wouldn't mind if you wanted to make it 6, Catherine laughed. "6? You're an ambitious man, Cole Emerson. Only when it comes to building a life with you, Cole said, kissing her forehead. I meant what I said on our wedding day. I'll never leave you, not in this life or the next. And I'll never leave you, Catherine said, the same words she'd spoken then. We're bound together. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Catherine reflected on how far they'd come. The land that had been scorched and blackened was green and fertile again, better than before because they'd learned from the fire, had planted more strategically, had created better fire breaks and water sources. Their love was like that too, Catherine thought. It had been forged in fire, tested by hardship, and had come through stronger for it. What she and Cole had built together wasn't just a successful ranch or a large family. It was a legacy of love and courage, of two people who'd found each other in the midst of disaster and had chosen, every day since, to keep choosing each other. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. The ranch expanded as their reputation grew. They added more land, hired more hands, bred horses that were known throughout the West for their quality and temperament. Samuel Jr. grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day running of the horse breeding operation. He had his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business, a combination that served him well. He married a schoolteacher from Denver in 1902, a smart, kind woman who fit seamlessly into the family. Rose proved to have her mother's independent spirit. She shocked some of the neighbors by insisting on learning everything the boys learned, from roping to branding to tracking. Catherine and Cole supported her fully, remembering how Catherine herself had been raised without regard for typical gender limitations. Rose eventually became one of the best horse trainers in the territory, sought after for her skill with difficult animals. Thomas was the quieter of the children, more introspective. He loved books and learning, and while he did his share of ranch work, his true passion was education. Cole and Catherine sent him to college in Denver, and he became a teacher, eventually returning to Victor to teach at the local school. He never forgot his ranching roots, though, spending his summers working the ranch he loved. The twins, Emma and Elizabeth, were inseparable throughout their childhood and into adulthood. They both married in a double wedding in 1910, two brothers from a neighboring ranch. They built houses within sight of each other and raised their own families in tandem, their children as close as siblings. Through it all, Cole and Catherine remained the center of their growing family. They aged gracefully together, Cole's dark hair silvering at the temples, Catherine's auburn fading to a soft strawberry gray. But the love in their eyes when they looked at each other never dimmed. They celebrated their 20th anniversary in 1903 with a big party on the ranch, surrounded by children, grandchildren, friends, and neighbors. Margaret Price, now an old woman herself, attended with her grown children, who still remembered and honored the couple who'd saved them from the fire all those years ago. You two look just as happy as you did on your wedding day, Margaret observed, watching Cole and Catherine dance. I'm happier, Catherine said honestly. We've had 20 years to learn each other, to build a life together. Every year gets better. That's a rare thing, Margaret said. Most couples fade after the first blush of romance, but you two still look at each other like newlyweds. Catherine glanced at Cole, who was laughing at something one of their grandchildren had said. He's my best friend, she said simply. My partner in everything. How could I not still be in love with him? In 1911, a journalist from Denver came to interview them about the fire and its aftermath. The wildfire of 1882 had become something of a legend in the area, one of the worst disasters the region had ever seen. The journalist wanted to know what it had been like, how they'd survived, how they'd rebuilt. Catherine and Cole sat on their porch, now weathered and worn but still solid, and told the story they'd told many times before. But the journalist was particularly interested in the rescue of the Price children and how Catherine and Cole had fallen in love. "It's quite a romantic tale," the journalist said, scribbling notes. Cowboy saves rancher's daughter, they rescue children together, fall in love while rebuilding from the ashes. It's like something from a dime novel. Cole and Catherine exchanged amused glances. "It wasn't quite that simple," Cole said. "Real life never is, but the important parts are true. We did meet during the fire. We did save those children, and we did fall in love while rebuilding the ranch." "What would you say is the secret to your happy marriage?" the journalist asked. Catherine thought about that. "Partnership," she said finally. "From the very beginning, we've been equals. We work together, we decide things together, we face challenges together, and we never stop choosing each other, even when things get hard." "And respect," Cole added. "I've always respected Catherine's intelligence, her strength, her opinions. She's never been just a wife to me. She's been my partner, my friend, the person I trust most in the world." The article was published a few weeks later, and Catherine was both amused and embarrassed by how romantic the journalist had made their story sound. But reading it, she had to admit that it really was a remarkable love story. Two people brought together by disaster, who'd built something beautiful from the ashes of destruction. As they moved into their 60s, Cole and Catherine gradually handed over more responsibility to their children and grandchildren. They still worked the ranch, but at a slower pace, taking time to enjoy the life they'd built. They took long rides together, just the two of them, exploring the land that had been their home for so many years. One day in the summer of 1915, they rode up to the rise where Cole had proposed all those years ago. The view hadn't changed much. The ranch spread out below them, prosperous and thriving, with the next generation already building their own legacies. "Do you remember the first time we came up here together?" Cole asked, his voice still strong despite his years. "The night you proposed," Catherine said, smiling at the memory. "You were so nervous. I'd never seen you nervous before." "I was terrified you'd say no," Cole admitted. "I couldn't believe someone like you would want to spend her life with a drifter cowboy." "You were never just a cowboy," Catherine said, turning to look at him. The years had lined his face and silvered his hair, but his eyes were the same gray-blue that had captured her heart. "You were the bravest, kindest, most honorable man I'd ever met. You still are." "We've had a good life, haven't we?" Cole said, taking her hand. "The best," Catherine agreed. "Better than I could have imagined that day during the fire." "I think about that sometimes," Cole said thoughtfully. "How one day, one moment can change everything. If I hadn't heard those children crying, if I hadn't decided to go back, if you hadn't followed me." "But you did, and I did, and here we are," Catherine said. 33 years later, still together, still in love. "I'll never leave you," Cole said, echoing the promise they'd made so long ago. "And I'll never leave you," Catherine replied. "No matter what comes." They sat together as the sun set, just as they had countless times before, hands linked, hearts bound. Below them, they could see their grandchildren playing, hear the distant sounds of ranch life continuing as it had for decades. This land, this life, this love, it was their legacy, and it would continue long after they were gone. In 1920, they celebrated their 37th anniversary with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. Cole had made sure all the children and grandchildren knew to leave them alone for the evening, and they sat on their porch, sharing a meal and watching the stars come out. 37 years, Catherine marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we've always been together. I prefer to think we've always been together, Cole said, "that we were just waiting to find each other." "That's very poetic for a cowboy," Catherine teased gently. "You bring out my poetic side," Cole said, that familiar half-smile playing on his lips, "along with every other good thing in me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence only possible between two people who'd shared a lifetime together. Catherine thought about all they'd been through, all the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and challenges. Through it all, Cole had been her constant, her anchor, her home. "I love you," she said suddenly, intensely. "I know I tell you that every day, but I need you to know how much. You're everything to me, Cole Emerson. Everything good in my life traces back to you." Cole's eyes were suspiciously bright. "And you're everything to me. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. I'm the luckiest man who ever lived." They held hands across the table, these two people who'd been young and strong when they'd met, who were now aged but still strong in the ways that mattered. Their love hadn't faded with time. If anything, it had deepened, grown richer and more complex, like a fine wine aging in the barrel. Cole lived to see his 78th birthday in 1935, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Catherine was by his side, as she'd been for 52 years of marriage. He passed peacefully one autumn evening, holding her hand, a smile on his weathered face. Catherine grieved deeply for the loss of her partner, but she took comfort in the family they'd built together, in the legacy of love they'd created. She lived another 5 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1940 at the age of 80. Her last words, whispered to the grandson who sat vigil with her, were, "I'm going to find Cole now. I promised I'd never leave him, and I'm ready to keep that promise." They were buried side by side on the ranch they'd built together, under a pair of oak trees they'd planted on their 10th anniversary. On their shared headstone, their children carved the words that had defined their marriage, bound together in life and death. They never left each other. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, along with the story of how it all began. How a wildfire had brought two souls together, how a cowboy and a rancher's daughter had ridden into danger together and come out bound by a love that would last not just a lifetime, but generations. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Colorado mountains, some swore they could see two figures on horseback, riding together across the land they'd loved, still together, still keeping the promises they'd made all those years ago. Still proving that true love, forged in fire and tempered by time, never really ends. It just changes form, becoming something eternal, something that echoes through the ages, inspiring everyone who hears the tale. The Wayne and Emerson Ranch thrived for generations, but it was more than just a successful business. It was a testament to what two people could build when they worked together with love and determination. It was proof that sometimes the worst disasters can lead to the greatest blessings. It was a reminder that real love isn't just about the grand gestures and dramatic moments, though Catherine and Cole had certainly had their share of those. Real love is about the daily choice to stand by someone, to work beside them, to face whatever comes together. And it all started with a fire, a rescue, and a young woman's whispered promise. "I'll never leave you now." A promise that was kept faithfully, beautifully, completely, for the rest of their lives and beyond, proving that some bonds are truly unbreakable, some loves truly eternal, some stories truly worth telling again and again, passed down from generation to generation, a legacy of love that would never fade.